Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the MoeGamer podcast. I'm Pete Davison and I'm joined as usual by my good friend Chris Kasky. How are you doing, Chris?
Oh, I'm doing well, Pete. How are you today?
Yeah, not too bad. Had a bit of a lie-in this morning, so lazy weekend, much needed. And I've got a cat sitting next to me right now who is having an equally lazy weekend, although she has a lazy every day, so, you know, it's a good life really.
How is the new cat adapting?
Lots of biting still, lots of scratching. She's developed the art form of tapping me, not my wife, just me, in the face, usually on the eye or the lip at about 4 o'clock in the morning every day.
Oh, it's breakfast time.
So I don't know where she has picked this habit up from or why or how, but it's difficult not to respond to it. So, you know, it's difficult not to reinforce that. So, yeah. Generally speaking, I have to get up at 4 o'clock and just shut her out of the bedroom for a couple of hours so I can finish my sleep. But she's at least getting on slightly better with the existing cat Meg now. They're still fighting a bit and they still don't like people. Yeah, they still don't like each other going into their personal space, but they can tolerate being in the same room as each other now, which is nice.
That's good.
So they'll get there in the end.
Oh, cat politics.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, ever complex and mysterious place. Anyway, so today we're going to be following our usual three-part segment. The first segment will be the news, but there hasn't been an awful lot of that recently, so that will probably be a fairly short conversation. Second part will be what we've been playing recently, which, again, Chris, I know you've been very busy, so it might just be me talking in that one again. But then our third segment is one we've both been looking forward to for a while. We're going to be talking about specific kinds of distinctive art styles and ways of presenting games and so on. So, looking forward to that. So, let's kick off with what little news there is. So, what has caught your eye recently that you'd like to talk about?
I know we've been talking quite a bit about those new Compile Heart games from the Galapagos RPG label.
Yes.
Arc of Alchemist, you had a really good time with Death End Request, and we were also looking forward to Dragonstar Varnir.
Yes.
Arc of Alchemist was the one I was most looking forward to. And of course it has been delayed.
Yay.
From summer to winter, and won't be a problem for you, but sucks for me. For some reason, no physical copy in the US, but a physical copy in PAL territories.
Yeah, that's a strange decision. I don't know what's behind that, but yeah, well, at least with it, with modern consoles being region free, you can import without too much difficulty. So, and like imports from the States to Europe or vice versa aren't too expensive. It's Japanese imports that can get a bit expensive in my experience. So,
no, quite a few people on eBay do free shipping even from the UK. Like I have a couple.
Oh, that's good.
I have a couple PAL games for my PS4, like Bloodborne, right? The complete edition of Bloodborne never got a physical release in the West, but I got it for like $30 from a guy on eBay in the UK who shipped it for free.
Oh, that's pretty sweet. That's pretty sweet. There, yeah. Equally over here, I know there's quite a few Amazon Marketplace sellers who just list stuff on Amazon that is from the States, and again, they'll even do things like Prime shipping and stuff with that. So. Yeah, you can generally find ways around it. So hopefully you'll be able to get your hands on a copy of that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually not too upset about it being delayed because there is so much cool stuff coming out in like the next 2 months.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm more upset about the no physical in the West thing. Delayed video games don't bother me at all at this point in my life because I have shrink-wrapped games on my shelf right now.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I have an embarrassing number of shrink-wrapped games on my shelf. I even have at least 2 shrink-wrapped PS2 games.
That's brutal. I still have a shrink-wrapped GameCube game.
Yeah. Well, it is the life we lead.
It's okay. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
No, absolutely. Okay, so what else have we got on the list? Devil May Cry is coming to Switch, which was a bit of a surprise announcement.
Yeah, like the original.
Yes. Yes, the original Devil May Cry, and it's going to be digital only from the sound of things. But this apparently followed some online discussion about whether or not Dante was going to be in Smash Brothers. And I can't remember who it was from Capcom said, well, if they want to put Dante in Smash Brothers, they better put Devil May Cry on a Nintendo platform first. And then mysteriously, Devil May Cry was on a Nintendo platform. Thank you, face emoji.
That'd be really cool. Although, like, I'm a little I love Smash, but I'm a little like I want some more cute characters.
Yeah,
like I'm getting a little disappointed by like that's like Cloud and Bayonetta and Joker. Like it's all these like normal human proportion. Yeah, like if I want to play a fighting game with like all these normal human proportion characters, I'll play a normal fighting like. I really want, like, some other weird license. Like, I want Jibanyan from the Yokai Watch series. Like, like someone cute and dumpy who's, like, mechanics. Because, like, all right, we've already got Bayonetta, Cloud, all the Fire Emblem guys, Joker, like, okay, guns and swords again. Like, how mechanically radically different is Dante going to be from Joker, right? He transforms into Devil Trigger. He's got his guns and he's got his blade weapon. He's going to, like, how different can he be from Joker? Yeah, exactly. I mean, hopefully they have their head screwed on right and will provide some weird characters. I mean, we've already had Piranha Plant, which was a good start. Yes, super weird.
Yeah, I know Dante's been very highly requested, though, so they're probably feeling a fair amount of pressure to put him in there.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, they haven't said he's going to be in Super Smash Bros. At this point, but
I'm not saying it would suck.
No.
It's just that I want some other more creative stuff.
Yes, definitely. But yes, that was the context in which I saw this announcement when it first came up, and it just struck me as quite interesting. So
it's fun to speculate.
Yes, definitely. It is fun to speculate and then enjoy being wrong and having people pointing and laughing at you.
Yeah. That's the way it happens.
All right. What else have we got? Fans of shoot-em-ups, there are two... How do you pronounce it? Psikyo.
Yeah, sounds right.
Bundles. That'll do. There are two physical editions of Psikyo shooters available via PlayAsia now. They're Japanese releases, so they're imports. There is the third one on the way as well.
Yeah.
So there's two available at the moment. No, sorry, I got that wrong. There is one available on July the 25th, second available on August the 29th, and Volume 3 hasn't been fully announced yet from the look of things. So Volume 1 contains Strikers 1945, Strikers 1945-2, Strikers 1999, and Soul Divide, and Dragon Blaze, and Zero Gunner 2. I just kept scrolling, and that list just kept going. And then Part 2, Volume 2 contains Sengoku Ace, Sengoku Blade, Sengoku Cannon, Gunbird, Gunbird 2, and Gunbarich. So yeah. It's a really nice selection of games there, many of which have had standalone digital releases on eShop so far for Switch. But it's really cool to see them getting an actual physical collection, because these are the sort of games that people want to collect. And they're great games as well, in my experience. My experience with Psikyo is relatively limited, but yeah, my limited experience with them has always been pretty consistently positive, so... Yeah,
I'm very fond of Gunbird specifically.
Yes, I have I think the PS2 version of that on my shelf somewhere. I haven't actually tried it yet, but yeah, I do have that one.
Yeah,
that one's been released on a few platforms. Like, I think that's already that's one of the ones you can get as a download on Switch at the minute, along with Gunbarich, I think. So yeah, those are on the way, starting from July. What else have we got? Experience's new dungeon crawler, which we talked a bit about last time, I think, called Azure Chevalier, is actually a remake of a game called Students of the Round, which in turn was the spiritual predecessor to Demon Gaze. So through a slightly convoluted process, we've got a new game that is a remake of an old game that was a prequel to a game that's already out, or something like that. Basically, it unfolds in the same world as Demon Gaze, but doesn't have anything directly to do with it. Is what I can make out from it. It also says on the Silicon Era report that the game will include Stranger of Sword City Revisited as part of the bundle.
Yes, because it also takes place in the same world as that. Apparently, like Stranger of Sword City is like the decimated far future of when all the Demon Gaze, like all the cute Demon Gaze stuff happens. So like, it's all related somehow.
Yeah, fair enough. That's cool. Yeah. So yeah, that is due out in Japan on July the 11th as a digital game, and as a physical version on July 25th. No word on a Western release yet. it is going to be Experience's last PlayStation Vita game. So they are sort of going right up until the last minute with those physical versions.
They're making a big deal of it, right? Because like Experience was such a avid supporter of the Vita, so it's really cool that they're making a huge deal out of like, this is our last big hurrah. We're gonna do it right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll be surprised if we see it on Vita over here, but we are getting a lot of Vita games being ported to Switch. Yeah. And on that subject, Compile Heart and Idea Factory have announced that the Switch version of Mary Skelter 2 is coming west, but only as a digital version, sadly. So that will include both, like the existing PlayStation 4 release, that will include both Mary Skelter 2 and the first game, Mary Skelter Nightmares, as well. So you'll have both games in one place, which will be nice. Yeah, so there are no plans to localize the PlayStation 4 version from the sound of things, which has led lots of people to speculate that this is probably down to Sony being whatever they're being at the minute.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. But yeah, we are at least getting this, which is cool. And having it on Switch will be nice as well, because it's nice to have dungeon crawlers on handheld platforms. So yeah, cool. All right, what else has caught your eye lately?
Monster Hunter. So Monster Hunter World has got its. I mean, the game has had a steady trickle of like little DLC and updates, but now we have officially announced for Monster Hunter World the new big expansion, which is going to be called Iceborne. The big news from that is for big Monster Hunter fans, Nargacuga is coming back, which is like a big fan favorite monster. Which is very exciting because the Nargacuga is a really cool monster, and most importantly, Nargacuga armor that you build from it is ninja themed. So it's really always one of the neatest looking sets. So it'll be really cool to see the Nargacuga set in HD. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Very much looking forward to that. And it means we're marching inexorably closer to a Monster Hunter World Complete Edition in another couple of years. And then I can finally play it.
Hooray! Yes, that'll be good. This announcement, I feel like we've already had it. Or am I imagining it? Because I'm sure I knew all this already.
I don't know. I didn't know it until the PlayStation event this week.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely knew the expansion was coming, and I'm sure I recognised the name Nargacuga as well. So maybe it was just speculation back then, and it's just been confirmed now.
Oh, could be. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely the most like fan demanded monster.
Right. Yeah, like, that might have been it then.
Like whenever a new Monster Hunter is even announced, it's like, is Nargacuga going to be in it? Like people love this fucker. I do too. He's really cool.
Yeah. So yeah, when is that due out? Did they say? September 6th is coming to consoles.
Oh, okay.
And the PC version is following later in the winter for some reason. Ooh, excuse me. Yeah, so PC version is getting updated later, but that's been the pattern for the whole game so far. Which is a thing, definitely. Okay. We've got a story here about Platinum's secret project. This was actually the first I'd heard of it, so do you want to talk a bit about this?
Yeah, so there was recently a pretty extensive interview with Inaba over at Platinum, published by Video Games Chronicle, where they kind of talk about a lot of their plans for the future, and it's worth a good read because it goes through some of kind of the difficulties they've faced. There's a little bit of snippets in there about kind of Scalebound, and Inaba was actually specifically upset with how angry people were with Microsoft, because he basically says it was a 50-50 thing. It was our fault just as much as their fault. So like these things happen. It just outlines a lot of their kind of future plans, and most importantly that they've got projects in the cooker right now that they're going to publish themselves. Yeah. Because Platinum has been immensely successful over the past couple of years doing license deals with other publishers, but they're finding a tremendous amount of frustration. Specifically, they cite the difficulty of Bayonetta 2 even existing, like how hard it was to get Sega to relinquish their publication rights on Bayonetta so that Bayonetta 2 and eventually 3 could happen. So there's just a lot of discussion in the article about their plans to move forward with self-published projects. so that they can have full creative control of the new IPs that they create, so that they can make... Basically, they would like... Platinum specifically likes making sequels. They like iterating on things they've done, improving, and they want to be able to do that more with less red tape. So they're going to start creating new IPs that are self-published to allow them to have the greater freedom to do this. Also, then embedded in the article was the kind of... just the tease is that they are working on some new projects, and one of the projects that they're working on, they say it is, quote, Inaba says it is truly unlike anything else. Even for our varied history of veteran game developers, this is something that has never been designed before. So from a game design perspective, we are very excited right now. So, I mean, Platinum is legendary, and though they're one of my favorite developers specifically because of the strength of their design. So to have them saying that they're working on something that's truly unique from a design perspective is really, like, I got the goosey bumpies thinking about it, because like what are they cooking up? Yeah.
Inaba did apparently also say that he's interested in the battle royale genre as well, but I don't think that very much qualifies as something that's never been seen before at this point.
No, but their take on it would be...
Yes.
I mean, Anarchy Reigns was a really interesting conceptual game on the idea of online multiplayer. Like,
yes, definitely.
They did really interesting things with that.
Yeah, and so he specifically praised the work that Respawn's done with Apex Legends recently, and based on the strength of that game, he said that he doesn't want to do... If they did do a Battle Royale game, they wouldn't want to do something that's just shooting, because he feels that Apex Legends has already sort of set the bar so high in that he doesn't want to go in that direction. So his words are, trying to come up with something that's our taste in that genre could be very interesting.
Just one of their action games with like multiplayer. Like,
yeah,
I'd play that.
and I mean, just like a sort of reimagining of something like Anarchy Reigns would probably do quite well right now.
Yeah. So Anarchy Reigns is super ahead of its time.
Yes, definitely. I remember attending a preview event for it down in London and thinking it looked super cool, and then being quite disappointed when it came out, and just no one seemed to think very much of it, and no one played it. So a lot of wasted potential there, unfortunately. But yeah, it's still a very interesting game that's worth a look. Yeah, so that's all very exciting. I'm definitely up for more PlatinumGames stuff, especially if they have complete control over it, because I can see them doing some absolutely crazy nonsense with that, which will be a lot of fun. Other stuff that we've got, Dina has announced that... Is it Dina? DNA?
I never know. Sure. I always just go Dina, but...
Yeah, they've announced that they're partnering with the Pokemon Company on a new Pokemon smartphone game. They haven't said what it is yet, but people are speculating that it's either a follow-up to Pokemon Go or some sort of Pokemon gacha game, either of which would make a certain amount of sense. Probably a Pokemon gacha would make more sense, I would have thought, because I feel like Pokemon Go's kind of had its time now, and I'm not sure if they just release a new one, what they'd be able to do differently. Really. So,
and Pokemon Go is still going strong,
exactly,
with continued support.
Exactly.
Whatever this is, it's probably going to hew closer to Dina's other successful stuff with Nintendo, right? Because Fire Emblem has been tremendously successful. Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, incredibly successful. So it's going to hew closer to that stuff. No doubt about it. Yeah.
And I mean, Pokemon makes sense for that format of game as well. So, I mean, it won't be quite the same experience as playing a standalone Pokemon title on a handheld or a console, but I mean, they are working on that as well. So, we'll see. There are no details on that at the minute. They've just said that they are working on it. And the last thing I've got is Tetris 99, which came out a little while back as a free download for Nintendo Switch Online subscribers, and is a lot of fun. That is getting some $9.99 DLC that allows you to play offline in several modes. So it's called the Big Block DLC, and that includes Tetris 99 against CPU players, so you can play it offline, and also the standard Tetris Marathon mode as well. So basically, you can turn Tetris 99 into
regular
Tetris.
Whatever. I have Puyo Pop Tetris or whatever that was, so I can just play that if I want to play regular Tetris.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you can just play normal Marathon Tetris in that as well. So, but yeah, I mean, this is another option for those who don't want that or can't pick that up or whatever. So, Yes. All right. Anything else you'd spotted?
Yeah, I just thought it was cool that NG Dev is going to be releasing Gunlord to the Switch. So Gunlord is cool. It's essentially, like a Euro platformer in the same vein as Turrican, but it was released many years ago. Well, I guess not many years ago, but back in the earlier 2010s, and it was one of those games that was released for the Neo Geo and Dreamcast, just because they could. Like, they decided they wanted to make a Neo Geo and Dreamcast game, but, when that originally came out, it was kind of prohibitively expensive, especially if you wanted the Neo Geo one. So, I mean, it's one of those games that's kind of prized by collectors because the art is really neat. The pixel art is just unbelievable. So
that looks really, really nice.
Yeah, so the fact that this is coming out to Switch is pretty exciting, and it's an enhanced version with some new bosses and additional content, which is great. It's also very likely that a physical edition will happen because PlayAsia has published physical editions for like the past 3 or 4 NG Dev games.
Yeah.
So it'll very likely be something you can add to your physical collection. I'm not a huge fan of the feel of Euro-style platformers, but just based on the pixel art of this alone and the fact that it was originally developed for the Geo kind of makes it something that I want to have. Yeah.
But this is kind of interesting to me because, like, looking at this screenshot that's on Gematsu, I mean, it both looks like a Euro platformer and a Neo Geo game. Like, there's stuff about the interface that is like iconically Neo Geo to me, like the font they've used and the like the gradient on the numbers and that sort of thing. It looks like a Neo Geo game, but then like the sprites and the sort of layout of the actual game screen and the way that's working out, it looks very much like Turrican, as you say. So
it's a weird animal. It's a weird, also like legendarily hard. Of course.
So yeah, we'll be watching out for that. So that's just saying 2019 that's coming at the minute. I don't think there's anything more specific than that from the sound of things. But yeah, we'll be watching out for that for sure. Definitely up for this sort of reimagining of classic European stuff that's been coming recently. Because Strictly Limited Games has just put up that Ultra Core game as well, haven't they?
Yep.
So yeah. It's a bit of a resurgence in the sort of 16-bit Euro platformer market, and that's evidently the next fashionable thing, I guess. But we'll see. Okay, anything else you wanted to bring up?
Let me see here. Yeah, I mean, nothing really huge. Just that the Under Night in Birth series appears to be continuing. The latest arcade version, Under Night in Birth EXE Late, has been confirmed by, I believe, Taiwanese rating boards for PS4 and Switch releases. So that's cool. This series has a really interesting following, specifically in like the hardcore fighting game community. There was a bit of a hullabaloo because it's going to be at EVO this year. Like it's actually one of the games being featured at this year's EVO. So it's kind of gaining a lot of traction. So I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but if this new most complete version makes it onto the PS4, I might finally bite because it's got some really cool character designs and stuff.
I know it's very well received, and I sort of have a passing acquaintance with a few people who are into fighting games, and I know they've always had very positive things to say about Unist, as the previous one was abbreviated.
Oh, good.
People are desperately trying to make the abbreviation Uniclair work for this one, which it almost does, but not quite.
This might be the most unwieldy titled game I've ever encountered. I've been a Square fan for my entire life, so that's saying something.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a colon, it's got a square bracket. It doesn't have a semicolon, which I'm disappointed about. They could easily put a semicolon in between under and night. Under semicolon night in birth exe colon late square bracket CL-R.
So few of the things are even words in the title of this game.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, there you have it. Okay, I think that's probably all the news for the minute, isn't it? So, like we said, nothing huge going on, but a few interesting stuff that's sort of been announced or confirmed or whatever. So, yeah, some stuff to look forward to. But for now, let's take a short break, and then we'll come back and, well, I'll talk about what I've been playing recently.
I have some stuff.
All right. So we'll see you in a moment. Welcome back. So, in our second segment, we like to talk about what we've been playing recently. So, Chris, you claim you've been playing some stuff recently, so
yeah, well, I've been continuing my exploration of kind of like just quick arcadey stuff that I can enjoy before work, and I've recently fell in love with classic Housemarque stuff.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
beautiful.
So I've been playing quite a bit of Super Stardust HD lately.
Oh, wonderful game.
Yeah, which is just a real pleasure. Especially with the gold melter weapon.
Yes,
like it's just like getting that to full power and like whipping it around with the analog is like such a pleasure.
Yeah.
So I've been playing a lot of that. The recent limited run on Friday did a release for Battle Garega, which is one of my all-time favorite shooters. And I want to do an episode about Rising and aiding shooters eventually, but I've also been diving back into like the Rising and aiding back catalog. So Battle Garega, Battle Betrayed, the whole Maho Daisakusen series, which is really just delicious. So I've been playing quite a bit of just like shmups and arcadey stuff lately to some great effect. I also think we should pay a little lip service to that we finally got together and played a little Dragon Marked for Death online.
Oh, yes. Yes, we should do that again as well sometime.
Yeah, that was a good time, because I played it again after we played online, and I hated it again. So it's definitely, like, only fun with you. Like, only fun with a friend, because it feels so dead and lifeless without someone else there. But, yeah, I think we had a really good time, and I was surprised how well it worked.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the design of that game really shines in the multiplayer, right? Because I was a bit skeptic about kind of what it was trying to do, kind of translating the class-based MMO experience to a side-scroller. But like you were playing the magician, I'm playing the knight, and it worked really cool because my shield heals anyone in it. So like we were communicating MMO style during the big boss fights, and I was like, get in my shield now, and I would pull my shield up, heal the both of us, and then you were dealing your damage, and I was trying to block, and it really worked out well multiplayer because it wasn't just focusing on the enemies that I was worried about. I was also focusing on my job tanking for you.
Yes.
And I've never had that experience in a side-scroller before.
Yeah, it was really interesting because sort of the witch character, which is the one that I was playing, is so sort of technical because there's so many complicated button combinations to do her spells and things that yeah, it's just really interesting to have to concentrate on those and keep an eye on your positioning and making sure I'm staying behind you and out of the way of the enemies, or sort of keep sort of have you tanking the boss in one direction and me behind it and things. That's a sort of classic MMO strategy as well. So yeah, that sort of really added an interesting layer to that game. So I've not had a lot of time to try it by myself really, so I don't know if the witch is more fun than the knight character solo, but yeah, I definitely enjoyed what I played, and I'm up for some more, definitely. Yeah,
we'll have to do that very soon. I want to start a ninja too, because I feel like part of my dislike of that game is how sparse and empty the environments are. So I feel like if I'm a character who inherently moves a bit faster, that'll lessen some of the distaste I have for it. But I keep trying because it's into creates, and I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I'm just bouncing off this one.
Well, that's fair enough. And I mean, they've been pretty upfront about the fact that it's kind of designed to be experienced multiplayer anyway. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It is the best way to try it. I mean, the ideal thing for that would be if you had a group of local friends with Switches and you could play local multiplayer sessions regularly rather than having to rely on people on the internet. And I mean, that is an option in the game, but obviously you need to know the people and they need to have the game and all that.
Yeah.
Yes, sadly it's not as easy as it once was in the good old days when you could just get friends over.
When I try to talk to people about video games, they look at me like I'm speaking a different language, because the games I'm interested in and the games they're interested in are just so fundamentally different.
Yeah, same. I mean, like, probably my sort of most the person who's typically been the most gamer of all my friends, like all he plays now is Skyrim, and like he's been playing it for like thousands of hours, and we're like, play something else, please.
Yeah. Oh my god. It's like, great big world out there.
Yeah, it's like, but I've installed 250 mods on it. It's like, that doesn't make it good. If you have to install 250 mods on a game to make it good, that game isn't very good. But
I mean, I do like the mod. Like, I think the mod community is really cool. Like, you know, we were talking about Rage 2 the other day, and how we're kind of mildly curious about it because you know, it makes really cool single player first person shooters, and Rage 2 is single player only. And one of the guys at work that I can occasionally talk to about games, he's a big PC guy, and he's a coder. He's our company's like IT guy who codes and helps make like back workarounds for our you know, solutions and our programming that we use. And he is really excited that Rage is single player because id has already been like, yeah, there's going to be cheat codes. It's going to be just like an old FPS. And that also means immediate like mod support, right? Because if it's single player only, there's nothing for mods to muck up. Yeah. So
that's true. Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily against mods per se, but I just tend to find in games that are heavily moddable that I just end up spending more time managing the mods and thinking, oh, well, what if I install this one? Will that provide a better experience? And I just don't end up having any fun with the game.
Did you see that mod for Fallout?
Which one?
The one that was on Silicon Air a couple days ago that makes all the girls cute anime girls, therefore making Fallout immediately more enjoyable.
Yes, I did see that. Oh god, yeah, probably still wouldn't make me want to play Fallout, but yeah, it's a step in the right direction, definitely. There's a very similar one for Left 4 Dead, I think, that puts all the Neptunia characters in it. Like, places of 4 characters in Left 4 Dead with like Neptune, Noir, Vert, and Blanc, and yeah, I've seen quite a few people playing that.
I'd feel too bad. There's friendly fire in that game.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, mods can be cool, and like I had a lot of fun with some mods back with Morrowind. I didn't really bother with Oblivion and with Skyrim, but Morrowind there were a lot of interesting mods. But again, I found myself sort of getting a bit more drawn into the mod stuff and then getting a bit frustrated when there was like a cool mod that had a story that like wasn't finished or something like that.
No.
Like I vividly remember playing through a cool mod for Morrowind called Children of the Night, which was a lot more sort of story and character based than Morrowind itself was. So I was obviously really enjoying that because that's the sort of thing I was into. But it was unfinished, so like you couldn't finish the story, and it just broke after a certain point. And you were just like, I need resolution.
That sucks.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, I have really fond memories of the modding scene back in the late 90s for Wolfenstein 3D, for Doom, for Duke Nukem 3D, and that sort of thing. So, I don't know, mixed feelings. There's just like, I think, like, maps and stuff I'm cool with, and like graphics replacements maybe, but like, mods that are sort of fundamentally changing the way the game plays and sort of fixing it, if you like. If those become necessary, I find myself not very interested in the game in the first place. So.
Yeah, I agree. I'm mostly into that kind of stuff. I'm not really into like changing the fundamental mechanics of the game. But like the other, like that guy I was telling you about at work, he shared with me a really exciting mod for Halo. What was the one? Reach, maybe?
Yeah.
Anyway, one of the Halo games, and it changes the texture of every single model in the game to be pepperoni pizza.
Why?
So it's just a world of pizza, and like that, and the helicopter like blades on like the drop ships are just giant pizzas, and like you have to Google this, and every single sound effect in the entire game is replaced with a sound effect of Peter Parker from one of the Spider-Man movies going, "It's pizza time." Like
Why?
every
did someone do that?
every single time your gun fires, it's pizza time. It's pizza time. It's pizza time. And, like, so this is the joy of the mod community.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, the last time I really sort of got deep into it was probably sort of Doom and stuff, and
yeah,
like, there was PC's own magazine over here, which is the magazine my brother used to run and that I contributed to a bit after he left as well. They did their cover CD one month was like sort of 500 Doom wads.
Oh wow!
So there were loads of cool stuff on there. But one slipped through the net that they didn't find that happened to have a lot of pornography in it.
Oh my!
Yes, it was xdoom.wad, and it wasn't a very good mod. Pretty much all it did was it just replaced all of Doom's standard textures with pictures of porn.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, that was fun when I was like 15.
Oh. You were old enough for it not to screw you up.
Yeah.
I cut my teeth on pixel art doing Doom mods. Like, that was the first time I ever did like original pixel art. I had a buddy Ray, and we would sit in his basement and work up Doom mods. And one day he was like, "Chris, you're a pretty good artist. You want to try to make the graphics?" And I said, "Okay." And then that was like the first time I ever did pixel art was doing Doom mods.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I've told this story in a few other places before, but I'm technically a professional game designer thanks to Wolfenstein 3D.
Oh yeah, you did tell us that story.
Yeah, because back in the sort of pre-widespread internet days, our family was on CompuServe, which is sort of very similar to what people now remember as AOL. But CompuServe and AOL eventually merged, but CompuServe used to be its own thing. And there were lots of forums on CompuServe, one of which was like the Gamers Forum. You'd go Gamers and you'd go to the Gamers Forum. And one day, I forget the exact context, but I came across someone who was requesting Wolfenstein 3D levels that people had made. And I'd been fiddling around with some stuff at the time because I was sort of casually working for a local shareware library, doing stuff for their catalogue and stuff like that at the time. So I had access to a lot of sort of the Wolfenstein editors and mods and stuff that would come in on floppy disks because this was sort of the pre-internet days. You couldn't just go and download them. You had to get them from places like this shareware library. So yeah, I'd been fiddling with the Wolfenstein map editors a lot at the time, and I'd made a bunch of 10 levels that I was pretty pleased with. So I thought, well, I'll send them over to this guy. What's the worst that could happen? And a little while later, I got a check for $200, a free registered copy of Wolfenstein 3D, and a copy of the Apogee Super Upgrades expansion pack for Wolfenstein 3D, which incorporated my 10 levels. Which was very cool indeed. So I don't know if you can actually still get that pack anywhere, but if you can track down the Super Upgrades pack for Wolfenstein 3D, there are 10 levels in there that are by me. So enjoy.
Huh, that's really cool. Side note, how did we get on the mod community?
Don't know.
What tangent did we follow to make that happen? What have you been playing?
What have I been playing? Well, I have been playing one game that I'm going to talk about in the third segment, so I will hold fire on that for the minute. I do want to talk a bit about Neverinth, though.
Yeah, tell me all about this business.
Yeah, so Neverinth is a game that I hadn't heard of until quite recently, but it was apparently quite well received at sort of the indie showcases at places like PAX and so on. And it's a game by a company called Creact Games, who I think they're Chinese, possibly. I'm not sure. They're definitely from somewhere in Asia, I think, and they've got an agreement with a publishing company called Another Indie. And what this is basically is it's a randomly generated action RPG based on Norse mythology, and it's got sort of I'm trying very specifically not to use certain words here. It's got sort of heavyweight, slow-paced, timing-based action combat in it, if you know what I mean by that.
A lot of stamina management going on.
Management going on, yes. Dodge rolling, that sort of thing. Yeah, so a lot of observation of enemy movements and animations and so on, and blocking with good timing and doing block and riposte and parrying and that sort of thing, and getting currency from enemies that is both experience points and stuff that you can spend on items. And yeah, it's really cool. It's roguelike Dark Souls.
It's okay. We're all friends here.
Yeah. But yeah, it's cool, and I found myself responding much more positively to this than I have previous attempts at these Souls games, just because it's not as demanding of your time, is the main thing.
Also, the girls are cute.
The girls are cute, yes, the girls are cute, and the thigh muscles on the redhead are terrifying. Yeah, no, this is a game that does not expect you to sit down with it for like 50, 100 hours at a time to get a meaningful experience from it, because it is following the sort of procedurally generated. It's the sort of roguelite structure, if you like, is how it tends to get described these days, which means that you have your individual run, and if you die in that, you have to start again. But there is a persistent progression method in there as well, so there's stuff you unlock as you go through. So you can sit down and you can have an attempt at it, and that will take maybe 10 or 15 minutes or so on before you die horribly. At the moment, there are 2 complete levels in the dungeon with 2 bosses, and then there's 2 sort of unfinished levels after that as well. Which means that sort of if you get through the whole thing, it will probably take you less than an hour at the moment. But it's designed for repeat plays because of all this stuff you unlock. And you unlock stuff through achievements, basically. But these achievements are not just sort of actually successfully doing stuff. There's also achievements for taking a certain amount of damage, for killing a certain number of enemies with a particular weapon, for sort of breaking a certain number of boxes and so on. And every one of those then starts adding additional things into the dungeon on subsequent runs. So for example, if you kill a certain number of enemies with the sword and shield combination of weapons, then that means in subsequent runs you are more likely to come across sort of better sword and shield weapons and that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
And so the more you play the game, the more interesting variety of things you'll be able to discover as you go through. So it's pretty simple when you first start playing, but the further you go, the more variety there is in the runs. So like the more that one run will feel quite different from a subsequent one. So because each time you go through each time you go through a floor of the dungeon, you don't necessarily see all of the possible room types. So sometimes you'll go through and you'll have a pretty straight line to the finish without any sort of special rooms in there. Other times you might find a shop along the way that you can spend some of your essence on to get items as well as leveling up your stats. Sometimes you'll come across like a blood shrine, I think it's called, where you sacrifice your maximum health value in order to get sort of semi-permanent buffs for that particular run. So it makes you weaker, but it makes you have a particularly strong special ability. All of the sort of equipable trinkets and things that you find along the way, they have like a permanent passive benefit while you wear them, and they also give you a temporary pool of shield hit points as well, which is quite an interesting mechanic. So like if say you've taken a bit of damage from that accessory, but you find a new accessory that maybe isn't quite as good as the one you're currently wearing, you might want to take that anyway, just for the extra hit points it gives you for a temporary period. So there's a lot of interesting decisions to make on each playthrough of this, and it plays really nicely and smoothly. Some people have reported some optimization issues on certain PCs. I've not had a problem with it personally, and that is one thing they are prioritizing on working on at the moment, because it's early access at the moment, so there's very frequent updates right now. But yeah, it plays really nicely. At the moment there's 2 characters and 2 weapon types. So there's the blue haired chick, who's sort of the cover girl to it, who is she's a sword and shield character. So she's mostly about sort of either sort of blocking and riposting with the shield, basically. So if you time a block perfectly, it's a bit like the parry attack in Dark Souls. So you time that perfectly, you'll automatically strike back when you knock an attack out of the way. So that's kind of her key mechanic, if you like. And the other character starts with a greatsword. So she doesn't really have as much capability to block. She does have a move that is capable of blocking incoming attacks, but she's more designed for kind of going on the aggressive. So like her strong attack, for example, she leaps at them with the greatsword. Oh, excuse me. Terribly sorry. She leaps at them with the greatsword and sort of knocks them down onto the floor, and then you can get a couple of free attacks on the enemies while they're lying on the floor and so on. So getting a real feel for these different weapons is a key part of the game. And Yeah, so it's looking really cool so far. So like I say, it's unfinished at the moment because it's early access and they're pretty open about that. The final game is supposed to have 5 different playable characters, each of whom will have kind of a story to discover about their background. They're all supposed to be sort of based on legendary heroines, I think.
Okay. I hope there's a spear character in there.
Yeah, I don't know what they're planning for the other weapons at the minute, because like I say, it's just sword and shield and greatsword at the minute, but presumably each of the characters will have their own iconic weapon. But at the same time, if you particularly like a character but you don't like their weapon type, there's nothing stopping you switching to another weapon type. So you can play the blue-haired girl with the greatsword if you want to.
Oh, okay. You just have to like find it in the dungeon run, or
yeah,
do you
exactly.
equip it before?
After a certain period, there's one of the achievements unlocks the various weapon types in the hub area before you go into the main dungeon.
Oh, cool.
And from there, you can, if you want to use the greatsword, you just pick up the greatsword. And there's certain related achievements to that mean that greatsword you pick up might be slightly better than the normal starting sword, and so on. So yeah, again, there's this nice sort of random loot thing going on there as well. So
I like it.
Yeah, an interesting thing about the loot is, in my experience so far, there's never sort of something that is just straight up better than something else. There's always sort of some sort of decision you have to make, because yes, this sword might be stronger, but it might cost you more stamina to swing or something like that. Or yes, this sword might do less damage, but it attacks more quickly, and that sort of thing. So there's it's rare that you'll find something that is sort of flat out better than something previously you've got. So
it's not just a number scaling game.
No. It's all about playstyle and developing your playstyle and adapting that playstyle to the items you find and so on. So, yeah, I'm really excited about playing this, and I'm glad that it was brought to my attention in the first place, because I've been very much enjoying it so far. What else have I been playing? I've been revisiting Shadow Warrior 2 after last episode's discussion as well.
Oh, yay!
Yeah, so having a lot of fun with that. I started a new game rather than picking up my my save file that I had before, which I'd got to the sort of end game side of things, which I haven't really explored at all yet. So just to sort of refamiliarize myself with the game, I thought I'd start a new playthrough on a harder difficulty. And my first playthrough, I was primarily focusing on the melee combat in there, which is great in that game because there's loads of interesting special moves and stuff. This time around, I'm using the guns a bit more, and yeah, the guns in that game are really fun. I hadn't really sort of appreciated it much before because I hadn't really taken the time to put the upgrade gems in them and make them really worth using.
Okay.
But yeah, there's some really cool guns in there, and the very nature of Shadow Warrior 2 is that you can change how things how your various weapons work in quite radical ways by plugging these gems into them. So a lot of people complain about sort of Shadow Warrior having too much loot, if you like, but and there is a lot of loot. You do pick up a lot of loot throughout the game, but the sort of way to think of it is you're kind of sort of enhancing your skills, really. So if you think of it in sort of Diablo terms, then basically the actual weapons you pick up are like the skills that you're using. And then the stuff you plug into those things are the equivalent of the various bits of armor that you then put on your character to enhance various aspects of it and boost certain types of damage and boost certain secondary stats and so on. So, but the further you go in the game, there's sort of a lot of focus on sort of hitting weak points and that sort of thing as well. So, like if you can sort of develop your arsenal so that, like, you have a shotgun that shoots acid bullets, and you have a submachine gun that sets things on fire, and like a pistol that freezes things and that kind of thing. So you can really alter the way these weapons work as the game goes on, and you can freely chop and change and swap around these gems as much as you like as well. They're not like permanent upgrades or anything like that, so you can quite feasibly stick with a weapon that you really like and just continually upgrade it and do interesting things with it throughout the game. But I think the thing I like the most about Shadow Warrior 2 is just how it feels to play, just because the movement in that game is so delicious. It's a lot of people tend to talk about things like Titanfall as a really good example of first-person movement done right.
Yeah.
But yeah, Shadow Warrior is a really great example because it's basically taking a lot of principles from third-person character action games and translating them into first-person. So you can do things like you can double jump, you can air dash, you can sort of do what it calls a ninja landing. So you do a fast fall and then you roll at the bottom of it, so you kind of get up from a fall a bit more quickly. And just the whole movement in the game is just really nice and fluid. So like you can scramble over walls and stuff and grab onto rooftops and pull yourself up onto them. And so it's just a lot more flexible and smooth in terms of movement than your average first-person shooter. And yeah, it just makes it a real pleasure to play. So I know you've played the first Shadow Warrior, the first Shadow Warrior remake, haven't you? But you haven't played the second one yet, have you?
Correct.
Yes. Definitely worth a look. Definitely worth a look, because I've been very much enjoying revisiting that lately.
I do own it.
Yeah.
I bought, because when Special Reserve, they did a 2-pack, a physical pressing of both together in one pack, and I got that. So it is on my radar for sure. But
yeah, it's definitely one of my favourite sort of shoot and loots that we've had recently, and it's got a good sense of humour. It's got Stan Bush music in it. I mean, what more can you want, really?
No, I really appreciated the first one. Like, I still think very fondly about the first one. And in a lot of ways, I credit it as kind of giving me a second lease on life in regards to the first-person genre in general. Like,
yeah.
You know, I was pretty sour on it for a while, but then when I think back to like how much fun I had with Shadow Warrior, like I find myself wanting to get more first-person games and just ignoring the multiplayer component. Like, I kind of want to play through Halo.
Yeah.
After enjoying Shadow Warrior, just like I don't have to acknowledge the multiplayer aspect. I can just enjoy it as a first-person ride. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the first Shadow Warrior in particular is quite an interesting one, because for me it struck the perfect blend between modern and old school first person shooter design.
Yes.
So it had the speed and the fluid movement of sort of like the 90s first person shooter, but it had the sort of clear sense of progression and level structure that a modern one does.
Yeah.
And so you sort of work your way through these levels that have a clear path from the start to the finish, but there are secrets to find, there's things to explore, but then there's sort of big fun confrontations in there as well. So sort of one game that I often compared the first Shadow Warrior to was Painkiller. So there's a lot of sort of enemy arenas in that first Shadow Warrior where you sort of put in a big area and there's a swarm of enemies coming at you, and before you can advance you need to find a way to defeat all those enemies. And it's not just a case of hacking and slashing your way through them. You have to sort of use a bit of tactics and strategy to pick out the right targets in the right order and so on.
To give you an idea like where I come from in terms of enjoying first-person shooters, I recently had a dream about recommending Painkiller to somebody. Like, I love Painkiller.
Painkiller is great. Yeah, Painkiller is awesome. Yeah, at one point there was a description of the game on GOG.com that was written by me. Fun fact. It's not there anymore, unfortunately, but yeah, for a little while I was working with GOG.com, writing some stuff about their various games, but then they revamped their whole website, and most of the stuff I did was lost, unfortunately. But
it sucks.
Yes, so that is my main sort of tenuous connection to Painkiller, definitely. But so Shadow Warrior 2, very good. For some reason, I cannot convince my friends, who I know would love this game, to try it. I've tried numerous times. They're saying, this is a really cool game, you'd enjoy it. It's got loot, it's got shooting, it's got offensive humour. You would love it. You love all of those things. And they just say, I don't want to.
I wonder why.
I don't know. I just don't know. And they just won't really explain what it is about it that won't appeal to them, because they like all of those types of games. Like, they like Diablo, they like Borderlands, they like sort of 90s shooters, and yeah, it's just weird that it just doesn't seem to appeal to them for some reason. But I will keep trying. Because it goes on sale very often as well. At some point I will probably just buy it for them.
Yeah, gift it on the next Steam sale.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that is most of the stuff I've been playing lately. Like I say, there's one big thing, which is the current MoeGamer cover game feature, but I'm going to be talking a bit more about that in the third segment, so we'll save that for then.
Sweet.
So, anything else you want to bring up?
No, I think that's it.
Good stuff. All right, let's take a break for now then, and we will come back with our main topic. So, see you in a moment.
What do you do?
Welcome back. So, for our main topic today, we wanted to talk about distinctive art styles. And rather than sort of be vague about this and sort of just go generally distinctive art styles, we particularly wanted to focus on sort of crafted or toy-like looks. So, sort of games that make a specific attempt to almost look like another medium. And so there's kind of several angles I want to look at this, one of which is the kind of idea of toys to life. So not in the Skylanders sense, but in the sense of making something look like a diorama of plastic toys, doing things they were never intended to do in the real world. And also, alongside that, the idea of sort of a game's visual side of things being made of something other than pixels or polygons. So kind of two real angles on that. So before we get into specific examples, I just wanted to sort of ponder why this sort of thing might be appealing or desirable. So like why we wanted to talk about this in the first place. So have you got any thoughts on that? Why this is a sort of appealing thing to do?
Well, I mean, to me, it's just like there's just something so magical about lending a sense of physicality to that artistic presentation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, like as someone who's been dabbling in the arts for a long time, like it's not, I don't just like to paint. Like, you know, if you hand me a piece of clay, I like to fiddle with that. If you you know, I like to, I've whittled in my life. I like to do woodworking. Like I like to craft. I like to make things.
Yeah.
And I like to interact with physical objects. I've got a real like penchant for obsessing over texture. Mm-hmm. In my life, like I like fabrics and stuff. I have a real like I'm really like when I go like shopping for new shirts, like I get in trouble because I get so sidelined by fabrics that I totally forget to pay attention to what the clothing even like looks like. Like I like so texturals and like and physicality are really important to me. Also, just I've always collected toys as well as games, so like the idea of having a game that is a digital toy box where you can play without making a mess, where you can interact with toys without breaking them. Yeah, that's all so appealing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, sort of building on what you just said there, the idea of being able to do things with a toy that you can't do if they were an actual toy. Because I remember quite vividly when I was a kid playing with certain toys and sort of using my imagination a great deal, but also at the same time getting frustrated that I couldn't sort of actually manifest the things that were going on in my head. Like I had this awesome kind of space carrier toy type thing called Manta Force, which was like a massive mothership that had all of these vehicles inside it and all these little people that you could put in the vehicles and so on, and it was amazing. But like there was just sort of playing with that, I was always sort of quite conscious of the fact that I was actually sitting on my lounge floor playing with it, and I wasn't actually sending them underwater or through the air or anything like that. And that side of things just sort of always got me slightly frustrated as a kid. And one of the things I like about this kind of thing, the kind of sort of toys to life presentation, is the ability to sort of really realize those kind of childish fantasies, if you like.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of my favorite things about, you know, this isn't an example of the type of games we want to talk about today, but I really love the two Transformers games that High Moon Studios did a couple of years ago. War for Cybertron, and I forget what the other one was. Because I remember the first time I played the first one, and I was just screaming, this is what was going on inside my head. When I was on the floor with my dad, like playing Transformers in like the late 80s, like sitting on the carpet, like that was what inside my head was happening.
Yes.
And so it's cool when you can feel that way.
Yes. And at the same time, the original concept of Super Smash Brothers was this exactly, wasn't it? The original concept of Super Smash Brothers was a kid playing with his toys and having battles with them. Arguably, the series has kind of lost sight of that a little bit over the years, which is kind of fine because it's just awesome Nintendo characters and other game characters fighting in various different contexts now, which is amazing in its own right. But yeah, the original concept of Super Smash Brothers was being able to realize the fantasies of having Mario beat the shit out of Yoshi or whatever. So yes, so Okay, should we get into a few specific examples then of what we're talking about?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Okay, so one I want to start with is one that I played recently, which was kind of the stimulus for bringing up this episode in the first place, which was Kirby and the Rainbow Paintbrush on Wii U. Or Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, as it's known in North America, I think, for some reason, because you guys don't have paintbrushes? I don't know. But anyway, Kirby and the Rainbow Paintbrush, for those unfamiliar, is a game that is rendered entirely in claymation. So rather than traditional pixel art or hand-drawn sprites or polygons or anything like that, everything is made of clay. And they've really gone the whole hog on this presentation side of things, in that all of the animations on the sprites in the game are deliberately rendered at a low frame rate, sort of like 10, 15 frames a second or so on, to make it look like stop motion animation. And it just makes the game look wonderful. It makes it look like an animated movie. It makes it look like the sort of thing you might see from sort of a claymation movie studio. And it's a really appealing part of that game's presentation. It gives it a nice sense of physicality to it, which is good because of all the Kirby games, this is quite a physical one, so because you're sort of drawing shapes for him to roll along, you're tapping him to make him move and attack and that sort of thing. So it's quite a physical game in the first place. So sort of rendering it in this very physical medium like clay makes a lot of sense. And it's just a really, really nice, distinctive style that kind of fits with what Kirby does as well. So
I had totally forgotten that game looked like that until you made that post about it.
Yeah.
Now I'm like obsessed with getting a copy because it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's absolutely lovely, and it sort of brings that all into its kind of thematic side of things as well. So the plot of it is that someone has stolen all of the colours out of Kirby's land because she wants them for herself. But like the main villain is someone who likes moulding things with clay, and so like when you are fighting her, she's constantly modelling things in her hands and throwing them at you and stuff, and they turn into different things. But at the same time, because Kirby is also made of clay, as you go through the game, he the Rainbow Paintbrush, who he is with, also paints him in different ways and makes him look like a rocket, makes him look like a tank and that sort of thing, and that gives him different abilities and so on. So they tie it all together really nicely, and it's just a lovely, consistent feel for it. And I think more broadly speaking, Nintendo are the masters of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, my list that I made for today is like 50-60% Nintendo games.
Yeah, just because Nintendo, particularly in the last 2, possibly 3 console generations, have really kind of embraced the idea of their games being as much toys as they are games.
Well, it's such an important part of their past, right?
Absolutely.
It's an integral piece of their identity.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Nintendo has a background as a toy manufacturer, which is something that Sony and Microsoft do not. Yeah, it's understandable that they can bring that kind of experience and that kind of feel to things as well. But also sort of the fundamental way that a lot of their designers think about games as well is quite different to the sort of things you get from Sony and Microsoft studios as well. Yeah. So, I mean, we've got things like the well-known example of Shigeru Miyamoto talking about Zelda being inspired by exploring caves and forests behind his house and that sort of thing. But yeah, you just very much get the impression that the people who work at Nintendo and their various studios are all very much in touch with the things that were important to them as children, and they understand how they can use modern technology to do new things with those things that were important to them. So but yeah, Kirby is by no means the only example of a game who has done something like this. We've had the various Yoshi games have taken different kind of crafted approaches. So most recently you've had Yoshi's Crafted World, which is kind of all sorts of various materials, bits of cardboard and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Before that there was, what was it, Yoshi's Woolly World before that, wasn't it? I think
that was the Wii U one, yeah.
Yes.
Even Kirby's been doing this for a while too, because Kirby's Epic Yarn on the original Wii.
Yeah, and I mean, sort of less explicitly kind of crafted, if we look at the Mario games as well. So like the things like Super Mario 3D World, it very much takes the sort of plastic toys diorama type of look, and then that is further built on in Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. Which is probably the best example of the plastic toys in a diorama thing I can think of at the minute.
I think this has always been a part of Mario's fundamental design.
Yes.
Even the earliest Mario games, there was such an emphasis on the tile sets having very noteworthy texture effects.
Yes.
So, like, I kind of staged my notes for today as almost just like a timeline. Like guiding me through like different system generations as this became more prominent, and obviously as modern technology made it even more possible for this type of effect to become more convincing. But I have on my list that really the first game that made me say, wow, made me think of game graphics as having physicality and texture to them was Mario 3.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I'm thinking very specifically about those very early levels in World 1 where the platforms are bolted on.
Yes.
They actually have like the little bolts or screws, and they've used shadow to make some of them look like they're coming off the background more than others.
Yes.
And then at the end of the stage is when you run past into that like black zigzag where it's like you run off stage.
Yes.
And it's making the aesthetic extremely clear in Mario 3 that like everything you're seeing here is a stage that's been built for you to interact with. Like it is a set design, not a real world. And I remember just like that early secret in those early levels where like there's that one platform you could stand on, and if you held down and ducked for like 5 seconds, you would drop behind it into the background. And I just remember as a kid, like being like, my mind just like fragmenting because like I had never considered any kind of third dimensional interactivity. Like the notion that you could also go behind. So like Mario 3 in a lot of ways made me think, oh, well, these are not just squares and rectangles. These are paper cutouts, and some of them are more forward than others and more backward than others. And so like Mario 3 was the first game that really made me think about this. Yeah,
I'd agree with that. I think Mario has always had a kind of chunky feel to it. And I wanted to bring up something that I've kind of sort of wanted to mention for a while, really, which is something that I've really noticed about myself recently, which is, I don't know if it is synesthesia, but it certainly feels something similar to that. But like with certain kind of textures and shapes and things like that, I sort of get a very strong sense of physicality with them. Like even if I'm not actually touching them or anything like that, it's like I feel it a lot with shoot 'em ups. In one thing, so sort of particular enemy patterns and sort of how difficult it is to destroy enemies and so on. But one of the games that I've always felt that with is Mario as well. Like I've always felt that sense of physicality to the blocks in Mario. I can sort of imagine their chunkiness. I can imagine what those blocks would feel like and so on. And so you're absolutely right. The Mario games have always felt very much on this sort of toy-like side of things. And sort of if we move forward a little bit to something like Yoshi's Island, that's kind of another twist on the same kind of thing, isn't it? Because
for sure.
Although that's less sort of to do with the kind of chunky block side of thing, we've got the whole sort of crayon aesthetic going on with that. But at the same time, Yoshi's Island also embraces the kind of the 3D aspect you were talking about as well, because there are sections in Yoshi's Island where things fall out of the background. There's like polygonal objects in Yoshi's Island that will fall out of the background that you either need to stand on or avoid getting crushed by, or that sort of thing. So
title screen's legendary. Just the entire thing, the entire thing being kind of presented as pop-up book. Basically is the overall thrust of Yoshi's Island. And that's kind of in my notes one of the earliest games I can recall where this was an explicit effort. Like Mario 3, it was kind of there, but it wasn't, the tech wasn't quite there in order to present this crafted appearance. Whereas Yoshi's Island was the first game where it's like, no, this background element is a sheet of paper that we have scribbled on with crayon. Like that was the first game to really have that I can recall.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I can think of any earlier examples, but No, I think you're right. Sort of around the 16-bit console period is when we sort of really got the tech to be able to do that sort of thing a bit more convincingly. So I can think back a bit further, and I can think back to certain games that have an interesting feeling of physicality to them, and like perhaps an interesting treatment of scale. So like probably the most obscure one I can mention is the video game of Basil the Great Mouse Detective for Atari 8-bit. In which you are sort of exploring a familiar environment, but because you are a mouse, everything is really big.
Sure.
And that game did a really good job of kind of expressing how sort of everyday things look massive and quite daunting and imposing to a small character like a mouse. I mean, it's not quite the same thing as what we're talking about here, but it's sort of this sense of scale thing going on. I think
it's related.
Is related, certainly. That's probably the earliest example I can think of. I actually didn't come to Yoshi's Island until much later. I didn't play it for the first time until sort of like a year or two ago, and so I didn't really see that in context. But
I remember when you discovered it. Yeah. I remember having the discussions about it and being delighted at your like childlike wonderment at like discovering Touch Fuzzy, Get Dizzy, and all the classics.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of interesting coming to this stuff for the first time now, because I could come to that with the context of knowing that people have done various different experiments with sort of almost the substance on which they are representing the medium on which the game is being presented, if you like, and so I can only imagine how kind of mind-blowing and weird that would have been, seeing that in its original context. So
yeah. I'm also thinking too about like on the Super Nintendo, like early examples. I know I'd mentioned to you on your blog when you had first started posting about Kirby's and the Rainbow Paintbrush, Kirby's Dreamland 3 on the Super Nintendo. Mm-hmm. Have you had a chance to Google?
I haven't yet. No. The Kirby game I've been playing most recently is Dream Course.
That's a great game too. Kirby's Dreamland 3 on the Super Nintendo is kind of a forgotten game. Mm-hmm. But it's aesthetically, the entire thing is like colored pencils.
Oh, cool.
And to this day, I don't understand the wizardry that made that possible. Because it's traditional pixel art.
Yeah.
And they've just made their color and line choices while making the traditional pixel art in such a way that it looks like it's made of colored pencils and paint and crayon. And like, from someone who understands how pixel art is made, I don't understand how this game is possible. So that's a really good example of it. And then, with the Super Nintendo, I had a note here too that just like in general, the onset of pre-rendered graphical approaches really makes this very possible. It's not always intentional, but like Donkey Kong Country feels this way to me too, because of the way that pre-rendered.
I always felt they looked a bit like sort of physical models.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are games that use that pre-rendered technology with clay and stuff. I'm thinking about Clay Fighter. Mm-hmm. It's like Clay Fighter was clay models, and using the same way Mortal Kombat motion captured real people, Clay Fighter used pre-rendered technology to use motion captured clay models. It was actually a stop motion game, basically. Mm-hmm. So that was neat too. I mean, the games sucked, but it was awesome that they were essentially a stop motion fighting game. It's crazy to even think about. Going into the 32-bit era, you had mentioned the Psikyo shooting collections for the Switch earlier in the episode today, and one of the games you mentioned was Soul Divide, which was one I wanted to talk about a bit today because the visuals of Soul Divide always really stuck with me. It's pre-rendered enemies in Soul Divide, but I'm pretty sure it's almost like motion capture. Like I'm pretty sure they made models and took pictures of them.
Yeah.
It's like the whole game has a whole visual profile, which I still to this day don't know if it was on purpose, like whether it was homage or not, but it feels like the old Ray Harryhausen stop motion animated movies.
Yeah.
Like Clash of the Titans.
Yeah, I'm just looking at screenshots right now, and yeah, that was one of the first things I thought. I was like, yeah, this looks kind of like an old movie.
Yeah, and like the character, like the bosses and stuff move with like you were talking about with Kirby and the Rainbow Paintbrush, a reduced frame rate. Mm-hmm. So they have this kind of clunky, stuttered movement, and they look like stop motion. And I'm pretty sure this was on purpose homage to these like old world Greco-Roman classic, films. Soul Divide's cool because it's a shooter, but it's a horizontal shoot 'em up where it's not ships, it's characters. You're like these winged gods. So like everything is just like, now you're fighting the Hydra, now you're fighting a Medusa. So like it all ties in perfectly to this aesthetic of these old movies that it also feels like. And the bosses, they just look like floppy rubber puppets that you can like reach out and touch.
Yeah.
And I'm super in love with it. Like it's not a super great shooter, and I think there's a lot of negative feedback about it online. It's definitely not one of Psikyo's best, but from a visual standpoint, it's just so refreshing and different, and it looks unlike anything you've ever seen before. When I was younger, I didn't appreciate it. I just thought it looked hokey, and I thought it was like bad pre-rendering. But now, as an adult, I'm relatively convinced it was on purpose.
Yeah. There are a few sort of slightly more recent examples of that as well. I'm thinking there's a few of Cave's shooters have kind of adopted this kind of look for some of their bosses.
Okay.
Like I'm thinking of something like Death Smiles.
Yeah, Death Styles, this is pretty deliberate, eh?
Yeah, it's got several bosses in there that are very much seemingly designed with the kind of rubber model or claymation kind of look. There's things like the giant cow and like the skull thing at the end of the early levels, and even the last boss, Tyranno Satan, which is still the best last boss name ever.
Yeah,
has got sort of hokey monster models elements about it as well. So yeah, this seems to be a thing in certain kinds of shoot 'em up, I think.
I'm googling Tyranno Satan.
Yeah, I don't think he's like the true final boss or anything, but he's sort of the last boss that you confront in a normal playthrough. But yeah,
okay.
He's like sort of this big goat-headed thing with sort of skeletal arms and so on. Yeah, he's great. I just like the name Tyranno Satan. Sorry, Demonic Imperator Tyranno Satan.
I love it.
Yes.
Like regular Satan wasn't cool enough.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, certainly Death Smiles has got an element of this going on in it as well. So, all right. So moving on in the timeline, then, what other things have you got in mind?
Well, I had also written down. I don't want to harp too much on Nintendo, but like, there's also like an offshoot of what we're talking about is like the paper cutout aesthetic.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the earliest games on the PlayStation generation after Soul Divide that I can think of specifically in regards to the paper aesthetic was Parappa.
Yes.
And what always struck me from Parappa was kind of this juxtaposition where obviously these characters inhabited this 3D plane, but they were just basically a single texture. It was one sheet of polygon and and the art mapped to that single texture, and they would flex and flap around like these paper cutouts, and they would even like fold on each other and like wrap around stuff. And I always just found it curious because with a normal three-dimensional game with chunky polygonal models, right, like fully like rectangular prisms tacked onto each other, I never look at like a polygonal game like that, especially in like the PS1 generation, and thought I can reach out and touch that.
Yeah.
Like, my brain acknowledged it as a 3D game and took the image in and whatever. But by making these characters less 3D in a 3D world, it tricked my brain into thinking that they physically existed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's kind of cool how, like, they did that. That, like, trickery was really special to me on the original Parappa.
Yeah, it's kind of strange, really, because I think about numerous examples where that happened, where sort of more limited technology was almost more convincing to me than more advanced realistic graphics. Like back in going back to sort of first-person shooters again, sort of think this is not quite what we're talking about, but going back to early first-person shooters, I always found Doom more immersive than Quake, for example.
Oh yeah, I didn't care for Quake, the original Quake.
Yeah, just there was just something about Doom's environments that I found more, I don't know if convincing is the right word, but certainly it drew me in a lot more than Quake did. I don't know if that was the fact that sort of Doom was basically good quality 2D graphics in a lot of places, whereas Quake was low quality 3D graphics.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know, but yeah, I've certainly had precedent of sort of more limited presentation actually ending up being more convincing for me for some reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all in the horror film community, right? The love of practical special effects is a very similar thing. So like, you know, there's a lot of distaste for CG heavy in horror, because the more you CG the heck out of a monster, it can be the most beautiful, convincing CG possible. Like, the whole Uncanny Valley thing kicks in. Like, you're still aware that that's CG inhabiting the real world. You can tell. You always can. Whereas if you slap the hokiest puppet in there, the rubber mask, like, there's just something so fundamental about the illusion that you can read. Like, that thing inhabits the physical space. Yeah. So even though the puppet or the mask might be a little cheesier than what the terrifying CG thing you can cook up is, your brain understands that thing inhabits physical space. So it's not. So therefore, it is a bit more scary. Yeah. And that's always been really interesting to me, and it almost sounds like it's the same thing happening with these graphical presentations.
Yeah, I think there's just sort of there's evidently a sort of certain cutoff point between something that is enough to provide stimulation to your imagination and something that is kind of too far beyond that. If you see what I mean. So like, if something is sort of too convincing, then your imagination doesn't have to work very hard. Whereas if something is obviously not real in some way, then your imagination does have to fill in those blanks. And as we all know, the most terrifying things come from our own imaginations and so on.
That's true. Well, it's like you were saying with Kirby, like, part of what makes the effect so convincing in Rainbow Paintbrush is the reduced frame rate of the character sprite movements.
Yes, absolutely. Sort of the idea of sort of paper cutouts and things sort of segues nicely into some other stuff that I want to talk about. That is, I wouldn't kind of describe it as the sort of toy-like aesthetic, but it definitely has a kind of crafted feel to it, which are several visual novels that I want to talk about.
Oh, cool.
So two of these are reasonably well known, and the others are sort of indie things that I've got a lot of time for, but some people may not have heard of. So the first one I want to talk about is probably the most well-known one, which is Steins Gate, which is part of 5PB's Science Adventure series. So Steins Gate is, for some people, more well-known as an anime than as a visual novel, but for my money, I think the visual novel is more interesting from an artistic perspective, because although the anime has got quite a distinctive art style in its own right, I think the techniques that they used in the visual novel are much more interesting, because Steins Gate doesn't use your sort of typical sort of clean lines and bright colours of you kind of standard anime visual novel. It's got a deliberately kind of lo-fi, dirty, grimy aesthetic about it.
Oh, interesting.
And not in a kind of grimdark sense or anything like that. It's just presented in such a way that kind of everything looks like it's kind of hard to describe it. It looks like a drawing of an old photograph. Okay, if that makes sense. So sort of like the backgrounds have sort of got noise and dust and scratches and things on them, and all the character designs, like there's no sort of blocks of solid color on them. Like, it's all sort of like colors that are kind of blended together, but they're kind of blended together in a kind of vaguely careless way. It looks like they've sort of been colored in and sort of had a bit of paint over them and that sort of thing. the eyes of characters in Steins Gate are really kind of interesting because they're almost hypnotic in a way. So they've got this kind of sort of far off look in all the eyes in Steins Gate. There's this kind of swirly pattern inside them, and it's just the whole art style of that game is really compelling, and it looks like it's kind of been physically made, so out of sort of cutouts and old photographs and that kind of thing, and it's a really appealing part of that game's aesthetic, I think, and it's one of many reasons that it is regarded so fondly. I think it's just because its presentation is so distinctive.
Sure.
And if you compare the way that the visual novel looks with the way the anime looks, the anime kind of goes in a completely different direction. So the anime's art is very kind of almost flat shaded. So there is not a lot of kind of highlights and shadows in the anime version, which again creates its own very distinctive art style, but it's quite different from what the visual novel's doing. And for my money, I think the visual novel is a more effective approach, or I certainly like it more than what the anime does. But the anime certainly has a lot of fans as well. So that's probably the most well-known one I want to talk about. On a vaguely related note is the current cover game on MoeGamer.net, which is Our World Is Ended, which is a game that first came out on Vita in 2017 by Red Entertainment.
Oh, I do love Red.
Yeah, and subsequently got a sort of expanded port to Switch and PlayStation 4. And this expanded port is the version that Psikyo brought over to the West. And so there's quite a interesting lineup of people behind this game. So we've got Naoki Morita, who is the director of the game, but he's sort of written a lot of the Sakura Wars games.
Yes.
We've got an artist called Eri Shirai, who is most well known for the character designs in the manga and light novel series, which recently got adapted to an anime called Grimgar Fantasy and Ash.
Oh yeah, a lot of people like Grimgar a lot.
Yeah, so he's got a really distinctive kind of sort of airy, almost watercolor style to his character design. So there's not a lot of very dark black outlines in his work. It's all very kind of light and airy. And his work for Our World Is Ended is kind of a little bit more on the colourful side than his most iconic style, but it's still very much recognisable. And I think the interesting thing about Our World Is Ended's art style is that, again, it's sort of taking recognizable things and then just putting a slight little twist on them in various ways. So, for example, all the character designs, if you look around the edges of them, they all look like they've got like little flecks of paint splattered on them and that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
And like it's a really subtle effect, but like it's noticeable and it makes it distinctive, and it means that these characters just aren't completely clean and pure and so on. There's like sort of sparkles and paint flecks and that sort of thing. And at the same time, if you look at the backgrounds are all sort of fairly convincing, but there's something slightly off about them. And it's a combination of things. It's a combination of the colours of the background being slightly more washed out than they would be normally, and there's also a very, very slight chromatic aberration effect on there as well. Sort of a very key part of the whole game's aesthetic is chromatic aberration, which is, for those unfamiliar, is sort of where you take an image and where you kind of slightly displace the different color channels in different directions. So like you might have the red of the image is just slightly to the left of where the greens and the blues are, very slightly. So in Our World Is Ended, it's most obvious when you look at interface elements. So like if you look at the sort of flashing cursor that appears at the end of lines in the visual novel, you can actually see it there. You can actually see that the sort of red part of the cursor is on one side and the blue part of the cursor is on the other side. But it's done in a much more subtle way in the backgrounds, and it just makes the backgrounds look slightly out of focus and slightly dreamy and slightly soft. And it gives it a very distinctive look and feel to it. It's not a very heavy-handed effect by any means, not as heavy-handed as chromatic aberration when it is put into 3D games. And often ends up giving people a headache in the process, because I know you've mentioned that chromatic aberration is something that actually makes you feel quite uncomfortable. But
it makes me like ill, like it makes my stomach lurch.
Yes.
Like not a judgment call, like I'm not being dramatic, like literally, like if it's really profound and I look at it for too long, it like gives me an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach.
Yeah, definitely. So So, like I say, in Our World Has Ended, it's used quite sparingly, but it is there. It is there, and like once you recognise it being there, you can't help but notice it really, and it's a very distinctive part of that game's style, and so that gives the whole game this kind of look of. On the one hand, it's got a kind of physical feel to it because of like the paint splatters on the characters and so on as well. But at the same time, it's got this kind of distinctly digital thing going on with it as well, with the chromatic aberration, and in certain places there's like sort of slight scanline effects and so on. So yeah, there's a really interesting mix of art styles in there that is sort of very, very attractive. I like it very much. So that's one I definitely wanted to bring up, and as I say, that is currently the cover game feature on MoeGamer, so take a look at that if you want to know a bit more about that. The last ones I wanted to mention are these indie titles. So there's two of these. It's called Lily's Day Off and Lily's Night Off, and they are by a sort of I think he's a solo developer called Cupin. He's on Twitter as Lolicunion. Yeah, basically these are short form visual novels, like extremely short form, as in they're like 10 minutes. But the whole point of them is that you play them through multiple times and you see all the endings, and in the process of playing this 10-minute experience through like 15-20 times or so, you then get an understanding of the complete context of it. So they're interesting games from that perspective, but the sort of most attractive thing for me is the way that they've been presented. And so he kind of established it in Lily's Day Off, which was the first one, and then he really ran with it in Lily's Night Off, which was the sequel, which he had a lot more time to work on. He had a bit more money and a bit more resources and a bit more experience. And so the character design in this, again, there's a kind of sort of hand-drawn feel to it. So all of the characters look like cardboard cutouts that have been kind of sketched with sort of felt-tip pens and that sort of thing. In the second one, there's a lot of sequences where there's backgrounds that look like they've sort of, rather than solid colours being filled in, it looks like they've sort of been scribbled in with felt-tip pens, and people haven't quite reached the lines in a few places and that sort of thing.
I love that.
The way they kind of move is almost as if they're sort of like cardboard puppets that are on rods, that sort of thing. So like they'll sort of tilt around and they'll move in certain ways, and yeah, it just gives the whole thing a very distinctive feel. And again, it doesn't make it less convincing. In many ways, it sort of really draws you into these characters even more, just because they are so heavily stylized that you can't help but sort of almost be sort of drawn into it and get your imagination working, and you imagine how these would be if they were real people and so on. So, and yeah, I found those immediately very striking when I first played them, and they're ones that I like to recommend people try out, because they're not terribly well known, but the guy who made them is really nice and enthusiastic, passionate guy. He developed these not being a particular visual novel fan in the first place. He specifically developed them as an attempt to be visual novels that kind of didn't follow the usual mold of visual novels. He specifically wanted to make a condensed experience. So even if you're not typically into your average sort of long form visual novel, these might be worth a look, because they've got a good sense of humor, they've got lovely art, they've got great music. So yeah, do check them out.
Yeah, that aesthetic sounds a lot like another game I wanted to mention too, which is Treasure's Rakugaki Showtime.
Yes.
Which was a brawler for the PS1 that never really came west, but it's I'm always looking for an opportunity to mention at least one weirdo Treasure game. It's basically it's like Power Stone, right? Like an arena brawler where like everyone can kind of run around on a 3D plane, and there's objects you can pick up and interact with. But the whole game has the kind of aesthetic you were just discussing with the Lily series, where the characters are all just drawings on paper cutouts with crayon, colored in poorly where the lines have been missed, and they're on rods. Like, and the rods are in. Like, the rods are animated. Like, it's just all part of the experience. And that game is so wholly committed to that aesthetic that even the cover of the game, like if you look up the cover art, the cover of the game has a faux, like a spiral bound notebook. It has the spiral binding on the spine of the, awesome. Of the case. So that's a really, really cool one that really nails this. And like, you know, to the point where like, it also does like the whole squiggle vision thing, right? Where like when the characters move, even the coloring in, like sometimes the direction of the crayon changes, and like it's like shifting and scribbly like all the time. Awesome. And it's really, really a cool game.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that until you brought it up recently. So,
yeah.
Yes, yeah. You are a fountain of knowledge on obscure treasure games, as always.
I love treasure. Love treasure. And there's multiple, like, because I had also put Mischief, the original Mischief Makers on the N64 is an example of a game where it wasn't deliberate, but just because of the pre-rendered sprites, everything has that, like, toy-like sheen to it.
Yes, very much, very much. That's got the same kind of, for me, that's got the same kind of chunky feel as Mario does to it, so it's got a satisfying kind of physical presence to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just all because of the pre-rendered. And it's not on purpose, but it's just what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
And you can be Marina from Mischief Makers in Rakugaki Showtime.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, which was great. Moving on to later generations, for the PS2, I had written out Tales of Legendia, which...
All right, yep.
Tales of Legendia is like kind of the black sheep of the Tales family, because it was one of the ones that's not developed by the Tales studio. It was developed by a different team altogether.
Okay.
And it shows, because it doesn't look, feel, or sound like any other Tales game, which is probably why everyone hates it and why I love it so much.
Yeah.
But it was... You know, like when all the other Tales games were like, you know, like the Tales games, they always put like the stupid acronyms, like, oh, this is the new ATQLBTS battle system. like they always do that, like ridiculous shit, and like they get more and more 3D. But like Tales of Legendia was like, nah, dog, we're gonna make 2D battle system just like the old Tales of Destiny, and they did that, and it was great. But I don't. To this day, know whether it was on purpose or not, but the visual presentation of Tales of Legendia has a really unique style, kind of defined by very soft focus and these light pastel colors, and it really gives you the feeling that these are figures or like dolls in like a diorama.
Yeah.
It's difficult to explain without really looking at an image of like exploring a town in this game, but like never in an RPG have I felt like taken out of the experience and felt like I was playing with miniatures in a dollhouse before. And that's really what Tales of Legendia feels like. And there's like a soft like Vaseline sheen to the character models in the battle sequences that make them feel like they're these soft vinyl toys.
Yeah.
And to this day, like I said, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but like my fond memories of Tales of Legendia are always of this kind of soft, toy-like aesthetic that it has. And I think it deserves a fairer shake than it got.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, one more recently was Puppeteer on the PS3.
Oh, yes.
And Puppeteer, I think, is a really... successful version of what we're talking about, because obviously it was intentional. The whole game was designed to be a puppet stage show that's taking place. I mean, the audience cheers, there's curtains and everything. Great textures with, you know, cloth and stitching and wood everywhere, and it's all apparent. The puppets are animated in such a way that like gravity is affecting them, and their marionette strings are visible. And what was cool about the game was there was kind of this metatextual element, because your primary means of playing the game and interacting with it is your weapon, which is a giant pair of scissors.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just about this unique visual presentation, which was really cool and well executed, but they did the thing that we love most, that we've talked about in multiple episodes, is not only have they taken a unique visual style and a presentation identity, they've married the mechanics to that identity.
Yeah.
So it's not just, those visuals aren't just there because they're those visuals. Those visuals are there because your primary weapon is a scissors. So if you're on a sailing ship and there's a sail made of cloth, you can use your scissors to snip, 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 and use that as a mechanic to climb the cloth by snipping up it and using the friction and the physicality of the cloth. Or like, you may fight a boss and notice that he has stitching on his arm where his arm meets his shoulder, and you use your scissors and you chase that stitching, cut it off, and boom, you cut his arm off. So like, not only is the game presented as this crafted stage play, but you're literally interacting with, undoing, and building upon that with the way the game plays. It's just one cohesive package dedicated to this crafted aesthetic.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a neat game.
Yeah. On the PS3 note, we should probably mention Little Big Planet as well.
Oh yeah, it's a king of this.
Which is definitely a great example of this. I know it's kind of fashionable to bash on like its platforming mechanics and so on, and its platforming mechanics aren't great. Like its floaty jumps and things are a bit fiddly to handle. But for me, again, the actual floaty jump side of things didn't bother me too much because it kind of felt like how I would expect that character to handle. You see what I mean? So like, I mean, he's like a little plush toy. He's stuffed with stuff, and he kind of jumped in the way that I would expect a character like that to jump, which doesn't necessarily make for amazing gameplay, but it certainly made for a convincing sense of physicality to that game, and sort of the way that game was presented, and even the fact that it ran at a slightly lower frame rate. I think it might have even been below 30 frames a second in a lot of places, but in the case of that game, I feel like that lower frame rate actually added to the look of it. It made it look like sort of like a craft project, sort of zooming in and looking at all these toys and these things made of cardboard and so on, and the physics model and so on. It kind of had a good feeling about it. I haven't played the more recent ones. I've only ever played the first one, but
no.
Yeah. I mean, I always quite like the feel of that game, and not enough to get super into it or anything like that, but the sort of physicality of that game always appealed to me quite a bit. Yeah,
it was neat. I didn't enjoy playing it, which is why I don't, I always say like Little Big Planet is a bit like an Instagram model. Really enjoy looking at it, but I don't actually want to have anything to do with it. It's tough. It's such a difficult thing because like I want to love Little Big Planet, but I don't. It's the same with that other game Sony put out, because like with the success of Little Big Planet, like Sony was just like, we're gonna really commit to this crafted stage building thing. So then they made Mod Nation Racers.
Oh yeah.
And Mod Nation Racers had the aesthetic of specifically that like punk like street vinyl figures.
Yeah,
which is a huge thing, is customizing, buying these Sofubi vinyl figures and customizing them with like paint schemes or graphics and accessories. And they really took that aesthetic and ran with it too. So that game had a very similar appeal, but I think Sony largely dropped that because I don't think Mod Nation Racers is a very successful game.
No, that kind of disappeared off the face of the planet. I know they had a few goes at it because I think they did it on PS3 and Vita as well, didn't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, it's one that you never really hear anything about. I've certainly never tried it for myself, so I don't know if it's any good or not. But
it's just like you just play Mario Kart. Like the problem with most kart racer games is just like why it's not. It's just not as good. Oh, I can't say that because the Sonic ones are so good, and I can't wait for the new. They can't wait for the new Sonic one. But yeah, it wasn't good enough to distract me from time that could have been spent playing Mario Kart. And I just didn't love the track builder that much.
Yeah. Because
there had been other games with track builders that I'd rather play, right? So like if I'm going to play a game with track builder, I'm going to play Trackmania.
Yeah.
So it just didn't, and even though we're talking about it because of its aesthetic, I didn't like its aesthetic.
Yeah.
Like I didn't find the characters attractive. I didn't find the overall feel and style of the way the characters were designed to be nice. So, I'm a visual guy. So like it's a very, very easy way to get me to not like your game is for me to not like the visual presentation.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first impressions count, as they say.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's everything I had that I wanted to talk about.
yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to bring up as well. And yeah, we've covered a good mix of stuff there across a variety of hardware generations and a variety of genres as well. So yeah, it's an interesting topic, I think, and like there's lots of different ways you can do a distinctive art style, which we'll almost certainly return to in a future episode. But yeah, particularly when it comes to the sort of crafted and the toy-like feel, then these are some great examples for you to check out if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's most important when you contextualize, you know, like I have, you know, we've mentioned before, but like we always got a list building of potential topics. Mm-hmm. And since we came up with this idea, like I put other stuff on there. Like I want to do an episode where we talk about cell shading.
Yes, definitely.
And you know, the more I think about conversation topics and points to make as we talk about specifically the idea of episodes dedicated to certain visual styles is also to really impress the different feel and the benefits of these different styles. Mm-hmm. So, like, you know, we've talked about how this physicality and how this sense of interactivity can affect the mechanics of the game and the way we interact with it. And that's what I think is most important when we talk about something like cell shading, or maybe we talk about games with a lush 2D feel. Like, every single one of these visual styles is going to also contextualize and affect the game in a different way. And that's mm-hmm. one of the things that I think is so wonderful about the medium is we're always not just talking about visual presentation, but the way these visual presentations are intrinsically tied to the game and the way it plays.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, so, well, lots more topics to return to in the future. So, listen out for those at some point. Right, let's wrap up as usual. So, would you like to tell people where to find you online?
Yes, absolutely. MrGilderPixels.com and at Tumblr, Twitter, and Instagram at Mr. Gilder Pixels. Really ramping up production on some cool paintings. So please pop in, say hi, give me a like or two. I really appreciate it.
Good stuff. And as always, you'll find me on MoeGamer.net, writing articles most days, putting out videos on YouTube as well, most days as well, so watch out for those, including the Atari A to Z series of retro games on Atari 8-bit, Atari ST, and Atari 2600 and arcade titles as well. So do feel free to watch out for those. If you're listening to this on SoundCloud, don't forget that there is a video version that you can watch on YouTube, and when we're talking about visuals, it's a good idea to watch a video version because we can actually show you what we're talking about as well as just talking about it. Likewise, if you're on YouTube and you want to listen to this on the go and you can't watch, there is also a SoundCloud version. If you go to soundcloud.com/MoeGamer, you can subscribe over there in various ways. So, just remains for us to say thanks very much for watching and or listening, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. Be sure to check out MoeGamer.net for new articles on Japanese and Japanese-inspired video games, new and old, every weekday. Every month, MoeGamer features an in-depth exploration of an individual game or series as its cover game, so be sure to check the archives to see if your favourite has had a deep dive yet. If you'd like to support the site directly, please consider becoming a patron or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.